Everybody, Robert Kennedy Jr.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We have 550,000 homeless people in this country, but half of them are in California. And I started looking, which only is 12% of the population. I started looking about what causes homelessness, because I felt traumatized by what I saw in San Francisco. My son introduced me to a researcher writer called Matthew Desmond. And my bias was, my assumption was homelessness was related to drug addiction. It was related to mental illness. It was a feature of really devastating poverty. And also that most of the people in San Francisco who are homeless probably moved there after they became homeless. And Desmond actually went out with the University of San Francisco and he did surveys and interviews with thousands of homeless people in San Francisco. And what he finds and shows in this book again and again in San Francisco and elsewhere, that homelessness has almost no relationship to drug addiction, very, very small. There's places like West Virginia, Detroit, that have much higher levels of drug addiction, much higher levels of extreme poverty, and yet they don't have homelessness issues like San Francisco. The people are mentally ill who are homeless, but what Desmond shows is that they become mentally ill. They didn't start out that way. And what he shows is the most important correlation, it's almost a direct linear correlation, is the price of housing. And we have, the American dream. When I was a kid, the central bedrock promise of the American dream is if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you could finance a home. You could raise a family. You could take a summer vacation and put something aside for your retirement on one job. There's not a single member of this generation that believes that applies to them. In 2013, a survey was taken of young Americans between 18 and 34. 85% of them said they were proud of the United States of America. This is in 2013. 1 month ago, the same survey was taken, and fewer than 18% said they were proud of this country. So sometime in the terms of the last two presidents, an entire generation of kids, of American kids, the most important generation, has completely lost faith in our country and lost hope for their own futures. I end up spending a lot of time at people's kitchen tables and seeing a level of poverty and difficult choices that I never dreamed I'd see in this country. Elderly people who are cutting up their prescription pills to make them last the week so they can buy food. Young mothers who are downgrading ingredients at the grocery store to get through the checkout line. A young kid who approached me in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago and said every Tuesday he makes a decision about whether to fill his car up with gas or buy a meal that day. A young couple who told me they had a big argument sitting in their rental flat with a baby crying on their lap and having to decide whether that baby is $50 sick or $100 sick or $500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. These are choices that, for the American middle class, it's not supposed to look like that. And today, the average salary in this country is now $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs. How do Americans dealing with the $5,000? You get the bare minimum, you're still $5,000 in debt at the end of the year. How are Americans dealing with that? They're putting on their credit cards. And Visa, MasterCard, Wells Fargo, Morgan, Chase, and Citibank are charging 22% interest. So if the mafia charged you that much, it would be called loan sharking, they go to prison. But for these companies, it's business as usual. And who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So they're doing it right in front of us. They're strip mining the wealth of the American middle class, the vitality of this country. If you own a home, you care about your community. You care about your police, your hospitals, your firefighters. You care about your schools. You go to the PTA meeting. You care about the appearance and your neighbors. But more importantly, you have an equity stake. You have an entree to American capitalism because you own equity, which means you can borrow money. It was a period of time after 50 years after World War II when the United States of America, the American middle class, became the greatest economic generator in the history of mankind. When my uncle was president, we owned in this country half the wealth on the face of the country, of the world. But most importantly, we created a housing boom immediately after World War II. With the GI Bill and a lot of different other legislation, we got that entire generation of Americans into homes. Because they were in homes, they could borrow money, and they started buying business. You buy a business, whether it's a restaurant, a retail, or a yoga a studio, or whatever they were building. And there was this ferment of economic activity that just exploded and made us the richest country in the history of the world. Today, we're going from a ownership economy to a renter economy. And in doing that, we go from being citizens ultimately to being subjects. In March of 2022, we committed $113 billion to the Ukraine war. With $113 billion, we could have built a $1 million home for almost every homeless person in this country. 10 times over. We could have solved a lot of other problems in our country. But we committed $113 billion. The same month, we cut 30 billion people from food stamps. We cut food stamps from $283 a month to $23 a month. Try feeding yourself on that. We cut 15 million people from Medicare the same month. And that same month, the Fed printed $300 billion unanticipated, twice what we're giving Ukraine, to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank. So when the bankers need it, and when the military contractors need it, the door to the safe is wide open. When Americans are poor, when they're starving, when they're sick, it's slammed shut. So they're doing this right in front of us. They don't even care that we know anymore, because they know that they can get away with it. And how do they know that? Because they have a strategy. And that strategy is an old strategy, which is they keep us at war with each other. And when the king and queen look out over the balustrades of their castle, they see all their subjects fighting each other. They go back to the banquet hall and pop champagne corks because they know nobody's coming over the wall for them. And we're all fighting each other, on these culture war issues that they know are keeping us apart. They're important issues. Most of them are not really solvable legislatively. They're all log jams, guns and abortion and or things like trans rights, what's happening on the border. They're important, but they're things that keep us apart. And what I've done, what I said I was going to do at the beginning of this campaign, and what I've done, I think, very, very successfully, is to go around this country and talk and find the values that we have in common and talk about those, rather than these culture war issues that keep us all apart. And what I found is that the landscapes of commonality are so much more vast than the things that keep us apart, the values that Americans have in common. Everybody wants to protect our veterans. Everybody wants veterans' families to be able to not have to go to food banks to feed themselves. They want good medical care for our veterans. Everybody in this country wants us to, once again, have the best education system in the world. Everybody wants to end the chronic disease epidemic. If you talk to Americans and the only thing you talk about is climate change, you're going to have people at war with each other. So if you want to talk about things in ways to divide people, you can figure it out. But if you actually want to solve problems in this country by bringing people together, and then there's ways to do that too. And it is a much, much larger subject than the little things that keep us all apart. So, my plan, and this is what I said when I announced in Boston in April, over the next 12 months is to find the things that bring Americans together and stop the vitriol, stop the gaslighting, stop the vilification and the polarization, and then lead everybody over that wall and take back our country for our children. So I want to thank you all. Thank you very much. And thank you, Todd, for inviting me.